Good morning, Rocketeers. It's Friday, and it's time for Read Aloud, Tiger Rising. We're going to get started today reading chapter 22. You out in the woods again with that girl? Again? His father asked as soon as Rob stepped into the room. Yes, sir, said Rob. Look over here, son. His father was standing by Rob's bed. Sir, said Rob. His heart sank. He knew what his father had found, the meat. He had hidden it under his bed until it was time to feed the tiger again. Where'd this meat come from? His father asked, pointing at the bloody brown bag. Without thinking, Rob said, Beauchamp! Beauchamp? His father repeated, low and dark. Beauchamp? He don't hardly pay me enough to get by, and now he's giving us his rotten meat? He thinks I ain't man enough to put meat on my own table? Rob wanted to say something, but he thought of Beauchamp and held his tongue. I ought to teach him a lesson, his father said. The cords in his neck stood out like twigs. He kicked the bag of meat. I ought to, he said, making me work for less than nothing, giving us rotten meat. He went and stood in front of the gun case. He didn't unlock it. He just stood and stared and cracked his knuckles. Daddy, said Rob, but he couldn't think of anything to say after that. His mother had known how to calm his father. She would put her hands on his arm or say his name in a soft and reproachful voice, and that would be enough. But Rob didn't know how to do those things. He stood for a minute more, and then he walked over to his bed and grabbed a piece of wood and his knife, and he left the room. His father was still standing at the locked gun case, staring through the glass at the deer hunting rifle, as if he was trying to will the gun into his hands. Rob walked to the Kentucky Star sign. He sat down underneath it and leaned up against one of the cold, damp poles and started to work on the wood. But his head was too full of his father's anger and Sistine's tears. He couldn't concentrate. He looked up at the dark underside of the sign and recalled laying on a blanket, staring up at a big oak tree. His mother had been on one side of him, and his father, asleep and snoring, had been on the other. He remembered that his mother had taken hold of his hand and pointed up at the sun shining through the leaves of the tree and said, Look, Rob, I have never in my life seen a prettier color of green. Ain't it perfect? Yes, ma'am, he said, staring at the leaves. It looks like the original green, the first one God ever thought up. His mother squeezed his hand hard. That's right, she said, the first one God ever thought up, the first ever green. You know, you and me, we see the world the same. He concentrated on that green. He let it seep through a crack in his suitcase, not thoughts, and filled up his head with the color. He wondered if Willie Mae's cricket had been the same bright and original green. That's what he thought about as he carved. And so he wasn't surprised when he stopped and held the wood away from himself to see a wing and a beak and a tiny eye. It was a cricket, Willie Mae's cricket, coming to life under his knife. All right, Rocketeers, time for our first stop and wonder. Why does Rob start whittling at this time? Think to yourself. He worked on the bird for a long time until it looked so real that he half expected it to break into song. When he finally went back to the room, he found his father asleep in the recliner. The gun case was still locked, and the bag of meat was gone. He wouldn't be able to feed the tiger in the morning. He would have to wait until Beauchamp brought him another package. Rob went and stood over his father and stared down at him. He looked at his heavy hands and the bald spot on his nodding head. He was memorizing him and trying, at the same time, to understand him, to make some sense out of him, out of his anger and his quiet, comparing it to the way he used to sing and smile when his father jerked awake. Hey, he said. Hey, Rob said back. What time is it? I ain't sure, said Rob. Late, I guess. His father sighed. Go on and get me that leg medicine. Rob brought him the tube of medicine. Outside the motel, the world creaked inside. The rain started in again, and his father's hands were gentle as he applied the ointments to Rob's leg. Time for our second stop in Wonder Rocketeers. When Rob allows himself to think about his mother, what happens? Stop and think to yourself. Chapter 23. The next morning, Rob put the keys to the tiger cage in one pocket and the wooden bird in the other, and set out looking for Willie Mae. He found her in the laundry room, sitting on one of the fold-up chairs, smoking a cigarette and staring into space. Hey there, she said to him. Where's your lady friend at? School, said Rob. But today's only a half day. He kept his hands in his pockets. Now that he stood before Willie Mae, he was afraid to give her the bird. What if it was wrong? What if he had carved it wrong and it didn't look anything like the real cricket? What you giving me them shifty eyes for? Willie Mae asked. I made you something, Rob said quickly, before he lost his nerve. Made me something, said Willie Mae. For real? Uh-huh. Close your eyes and hold out your hand. I ain't, said Willie Mae, but she smiled and closed her eyes and put out her enormous hand, palm up. Rob carefully placed the bird in it. You can look now, he told her. She closed her fingers around the little piece of wood, but she didn't open her eyes. She puffed on her cigarette. The long gray ash on the end of it trembled. Don't need to look, she said finally. The cigarette ash dropped to the floor. I know what I got in my hands. It's cricket. But you gotta look at it and tell me, did I do it right? Said Rob. I ain't gotta do nothing, said Willie Mae, except stay black and die. She opened her eyes slowly, as if she was afraid she might frighten the bird into flying away. This right here, this the right bird, she said, nodding her head. This the one. Now, you don't got to dream about him anymore, said Rob. That's right, said Willie Mae. Where'd you learn to work a piece of wood like this? My mama, said Rob. Willie Mae nodded. She taught you. Good. Yes, ma'am, said Rob. He stared down at his legs. I know a wooden bird ain't the same as having a real one. It ain't, Willie Mae agreed, but it soothes my heart just the same. My dad said he ain't got no jobs for me until this afternoon. He said I can help you out this morning. Well, said Willie Mae. She dropped the bird into the front pocket of her dress. I might could find some way for you to help me. So Rob spent his morning following Willie Mae from room to room, stripping the dirty sheets from the beds. And while he worked, the keys jingled in his pocket. And he knew that soon Sistine would be out of school, and she would demand again that he unlock the cage and let the tiger go. So, Rocketeers, we've met a lot of new characters, and I want you guys to start to explore their character traits. Just like we've done before in class, I'm going to provide you with the list. I'm also going to provide you with a few characters, and I want you to pick a character trait that matches with the character's actions. For example, I chose Billy Threemonger. I said that Billy Threemonger is cold-hearted because he does not think of others when he's doing things. He does not think of how his actions hurts others. That's why I chose cold-hearted for him. In a few moments after this video is over, you'll have the opportunity to do exactly what I did in my example. You'll have your characters, and I want you to pick a character trait that matches with them based on what we know about them from the text. Got it? Got it? All right, it's your turn, Rocketeers. Go.